Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a topic so sleepy, so oddly soothing, it might just out-relax a monk in a lavender-scented hammock. We're talking about the surprisingly cozy world of Byzantine bureaucrats and the accidental birth of the office coffee break. Picture this: endless scrolls, whispery sandals shuffling on marble, and the faint clink of wine cups at 9 a.m. You're not in your modern workplace anymore. You're wandering into a palace corridor in Constantinople where everyone looks a bit too overdressed for paperwork and just the right amount underprepared for productivity. You're about to meet history's most delightfully tired administrators. The ones who took breaks, then took breaks from those breaks, and eventually invented an excuse so good, so profoundly lazy, it became a global ritual. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your current time and where you're listening from in the comments. I'd love to know who else is losing sleep to medieval HR drama. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward, the hem of your robe brushing over, mosaicked stone, and the sound of quills scratching parchment tickles your ears. You're standing at the edge of the great palace, near the Chrysotriklinos, the glittering throne room, and just beyond that is your destination, the Sacrum Scrinium, the sacred office of paperwork. Yes, that's right, sacred paperwork. Because if there's one thing the Byzantines believed, it was that divine order and bureaucracy were basically the same thing. You pass two scribes already mid-debate about how many angels can dance on the head of a column header, and step into a room filled with scrolls taller than you. There's a faint smell of ink, candle wax, and, surprisingly, raisins? This is the nerve center of empire, the Byzantine equivalent of a fluorescent-lit cubicle farm. Except instead of ergonomic chairs, there are backless benches. Instead of whiteboards, there are sand trays for sketching ideas. And instead of caffeine, there's a jug of something warm and suspiciously grape-scented that someone's calling morning tonic. You find your desk, a smooth slab of cedar, and sit. Beside you, a senior notary named Theophanes is already at work, copying decrees in impossibly elegant Greek calligraphy. He pauses every few minutes to take a sip from a ceramic cup. You peek inside. It's wine. And it's breakfast. You lean back and blink. This isn't just casual morning drinking, it's part of the job. Byzantines believed that a bit of diluted wine or mulsum honey wine in the morning would sharpen the wits and cleanse the humors. Does it actually help productivity? Based on Theophanes' fifth spelling error, probably not. But hey, he's humming a hymn and seems emotionally stable, so success as you copy out tax records, carefully noting how many goats a village owes this quarter. You realize something strange. No one is in a rush. People get up, walk around, stretch, chat. One man does an entire lap of the office just to deliver a single scroll. Another returns from a brief errand with pomegranate, seeds, and a little pouch of frankincense. It's like watching a sloth version of The Office. Around mid-morning, bells chime. Everyone stops writing. Theophanes looks at you and smiles. "Break time," he whispers, as if saying anything louder might trigger actual effort. Everyone filters out into a courtyard, where shaded colonnades offer a breezy escape from the workroom's heat. Some nibble cheese and olives. Others recline against columns and debate philosophy. Someone starts softly playing a kithara, strumming sleepy notes that almost feel like a lullaby for grown men in togas. And there, under the olive tree, you hear it for the first time. Someone sighs. "I wish we had something to wake us up. Something bitter." That's when your ears perk up, because somewhere deep in that groan is the earliest whisper of the future. Coffee. But here's the twist. They don't have it. Not yet. The plant exists in distant Ethiopia. The knowledge is percolating, but centuries away. For now, they'll have to settle for watered-down wine and honey cakes. Back inside, the work resumes. Sort of. You try focusing, but Theophanes is now explaining at length the spiritual significance of punctuation marks. Apparently, forgetting a period in a decree could cause an angel to weep, or maybe he just made that up to stall another hour. You nod, smile politely, and sneak a glance at the time. Wait, they don't have clocks. You glance at the sunbeam on the floor. Still morning. It's then you realize something odd. Everyone here seems more focused on appearing busy than actually producing results. There are 5 departments that seem to overlap, and everyone's writing their own versions of the same law, but with different decorative borders. And yet somehow, it works. Orders are passed, grain is taxed. Emperors are praised in wax-sealed letters sent to distant provinces. Still, you wonder, is this sustainable? The answer arrives when a courier bursts in, announcing a new decree. All offices must now host mid-shift meditations to improve divine alignment and reduce melancholic vapors. You look at Theophanes. He looks at you. Nap time, he says, utterly serious. And you realize something profound. The Byzantines may not have had coffee, but they sure knew how to pace a workday. You recline on your bench, the murmur of distant chanting in your ears, and the scent of beeswax lulling you deeper into the haze. Productivity can wait. After all, there's a whole empire to keep slightly behind schedule. You wake up, well, not really wake up, more like drift upward. Half lucid, face smushed against the cedar desk, your robe imprint faintly outlined in ink. Around you, the slow rustle of parchment resumes. It's post-nap time, which is, to say, the second most productive period in the Byzantine workday. The first, of course, was the part where everyone took a break. You stretch and glance around. No one says a word about your impromptu snooze. In fact, Theophanes gives you a slow, understanding nod, the kind of nod that says, "Yes, my friend, the spirit moves slow after baked olives." You wander into the adjoining chamber, Magnora. It's not just a glorified office, it's the administrative belly of the beast. Think of it like an open-plan co-working space, if your co-workers were minor nobility and wore gold-threaded belts. Here, everything's covered in mosaics so distracting you'd crash into a column if you looked up too fast. And yes, that did just happen. You rub your forehead and blink. Before you, a low marble platform glows with sunlight. This is where petitions are read, laws are debated, and one guy is currently trying to convince a committee that his neighbor's donkey has diplomatic immunity. This place, in all its Byzantine glory, and oh, is it Byzantine, might just be the closest thing we've got to the first modern government office. It has structure. It has protocol. It has meetings that start late and last too long. Honestly, all it's missing is an HR department and a passive-aggressive email chain. The meeting begins. A notary clears his throat with the urgency of someone who's about to read aloud for 45 minutes. You listen, though your attention drifts in and out like a fan oscillating too slowly. Names, dates, tribute taxes, fishery rights. It's a lullaby in bureaucraties. But then you catch something odd. And thus, the matter of ink allocation for the Department of Naval Accounting remains unresolved. Ink allocation? There's an entire department arguing over who gets how much ink. Theophanes leans in. They've been at it for weeks. Turns out the Navy writes longer reports. You stifle a laugh. You imagine a tiny maritime office filled with exhausted scribes desperately pleading, "Please, we just need 2 more ounces," to describe the sales. And yet, as silly as it sounds, this is serious business. Records are the foundation of Byzantine control. The empire's strength lies not just in swords, but scrolls. Every goat taxed, every field surveyed, every legal exemption recorded and triple-checked. You squint at the logbook in front of you. It's filled with meticulously hand-lettered notes in Greek minuscule. Some letters curl like ribbons. Others are jagged like lightning. One whole page is just marginalia, a miniature doodle of a pelican wearing a crown. No one seems to question it, because here being a bureaucrat is an art form. Scribes train for years to write beautifully, not just legibly. The more ornate your writing, the more prestige you earn. A sloppy hand? Social death. One clerk was once reassigned to graveyard shift roster copying for using the wrong flourish on a final sigma. And then it hits you. This isn't just an office. It's a performance. Everyone's playing their role. The diligent scribe, the wise overseer, the petitioning citizen with a flair for dramatics. You glance toward a corner where 3 junior clerks are whispering with the intensity of spies. You catch fragments of words: relocation, ambassador's sister, and almond paste. Theophanes leans over again. Probably a scandal, or they're organizing the midweek snack schedule. You don't ask. Either way, it's bureaucracy doing what bureaucracy does best, creating endless, exquisite distractions. As the afternoon light slants through the narrow windows, a gong rings softly. Time for the second break. Yes, second. Don't act surprised. This one's less formal, more fluid. People take turns stepping out. Some stroll to the library wing. Others pace around the colonnade, murmuring prayers or practicing speeches to deliver to their supervisors. You follow a short hallway and find a tiny side chamber, dark and cool. A few tired officials are already lounging on cushions, drinking something thick. You peer into a cup. It smells earthy, roasted, bitter. One of them notices your curiosity and offers a shrug. From the south, something new keeps the mind alert. You sip, it's strong, unpleasant, and somehow invigorating. You look up. They're watching you with amused expressions. No name for it yet, one mutters, but it grows on you. Coffee? Could it be? A prototype, maybe. Whatever it is, it's definitely not Molsum. It's bold, sharp. It demands your attention in a way no honey wine ever could. You take another sip. You don't know it yet, but this might be one of the earliest moments of the office coffee break, nascent, unbranded, and entirely unintentional. And just like that, you're summoned back to Magnora. Time to review military inventories. Again, you sigh, straighten your robe, and trudge back to the marble hall. But you're wide awake now, not from rest, not from duty, from that mysterious cup of almost coffee, and in the halls of Byzantine administration, that's enough to make you a revolutionary. You shuffle back into the chamber, the weight of the coffee, or whatever that strange brew was, still humming beneath your ribs. Your step is lighter, your brain slightly buzzier. You glance over at Theophanes, who's now fanning himself with a scroll and muttering something about humid thought vapors. He raises a brow at your energy. You've either just found divine inspiration, he says, or something caffeinated. You smile. No comment. The meeting drags on, this time involving discussions about border taxes near Cappadocia. You're expected to take notes, but everyone knows the real business of the hour is simply waiting for someone to mispronounce a provincial name, which mercifully happens. The word melitine becomes melodine. Someone giggles, and suddenly the entire chamber is locked in a 5-minute etiquette pause while everyone pretends to cough. But let's pause here, not from exhaustion, but appreciation. Because what you're witnessing isn't inefficiency, it's a system. Byzantine officials didn't just work, they performed bureaucracy like an opera, long, dramatic, occasionally absurd, and filled with unintended intermissions. Theophanes once again leans toward you with a theatrical sigh. We toil in loops, my friend, endless loops. The empire feeds on forms, not facts. You nod solemnly, but your thoughts drift to the earlier coffee. You're starting to suspect there's a group of rebels in this place. Not sword-wielding. Dissidents, worse. Quiet innovators. People smuggling alertness into a system powered by naps and wine. You wander briefly at lunch. The meal is modest: dates, olives, bread, a little salted fish. A clerk nearby mutters that fish improves memory. Another says it just gives him dreams about tax collection. And then, just as you're finishing your crust, it happens. A sudden lull in the courtyard. A break not by design, but by necessity. You hear it before you see it. The unmistakable sound of synchronized snoring. The main hall, half-shadowed and overly ventilated, has become a sleeping chamber. Men slouched in their seats. One fellow is face down in his ink tray. Another is softly muttering what sounds suspiciously like a poetry draft. You blink. It's not unusual. This, believe it or not, is part of the schedule. They just don't write it down. You recline against a pillar and listen. The snores are rhythmic, oddly soothing. You begin to wonder, did the Byzantines invent the siesta? Or did they simply take the Roman bath and lounge model and adapt it for the least exciting environment imaginable? Theophanies, ever alert to moments, a philosophical reflection, murmurs, in rest we find truth, or at least we forget about deadlines. You chuckle, because here's what no one outside this marble labyrinth seems to understand. The Byzantine bureaucracy needs these pauses. These pockets of idleness are not a flaw, they're a function. Without them, the machinery overheats. The empire's gears grind with ceremonial complexity, and these little timeouts are like pouring oil into the cranky engine of law and order. You glance down at a fresh stack of imperial forms. They're all blank. Each requires names, titles, reasons, citations, and 3 witness marks for a request to receive a copy of a previous request. You pick up your pen. You hesitate. But instead of writing, your fingers trace an idle swirl into the parchment corner. It turns into a vine, then a face, then a pigeon with a scroll in its beak. You're not alone. The clerk beside you is shading in the folds of his robe on a figure he drew, reenacting a grain tax debate as a wrestling match. Even art is sneaking into the workflow. And why not? When rules overwhelm reason, creativity leaks through the cracks. It's almost as if these slow days and repeated breaks don't just preserve sanity, they invite imagination. They transform monotony into ritual, repetition into meditation, sleepiness into a kind of sacred rhythm. Still, you know something's changing. You see it in the younger clerks, the ones passing tiny cups and whispering about bean water. You see it in how they move faster, write tighter, skip the extra flourish on their calligraphy loops. Something is brewing, and not just in their mugs. Theophanes interrupts your thoughts with a yawn that could trigger an earthquake. Ah, he sighs, we've earned our post-lunch walk. Wait, another break? Of course. You follow him into the south colonnade, where sunlight spills across a row of silent statues. He pauses beside a bust of an emperor and whispers, he once outlawed naps. The court almost revolted. You smile. Not because it's funny, though it is, but because it explains so much. There's a reason this empire endured for over 1,000 years. Not because of conquest. Not solely because of faith. But because they knew how to work just enough before stopping for snacks. And in that moment, as you lean against the cool stone, you understand something timeless. The coffee break. Like most things in life, started not as a revolution, but as a sigh. You're back at your desk, again. The sun has shifted, casting longer shadows through the latticed windows. The room feels more like a slow cooker than an office now, warm, fragrant, and slightly sticky with the scent of old ink and worn leather. Theophanes re-enters, holding a lemon. Just a lemon. He sets it gently beside his scroll like it's a talisman. You stare. It keeps the mind sharp, he says. Or at least it keeps people from sitting too close. You nod, because at this point, everything might be true. Lemon wards off fatigue. Fish helps you remember poetry. And bean water gives you superpowers. Nothing's off the table anymore. But today's session, This one's different. The head scribe, a stoic man named Methodios, walks in with a seriousness usually reserved for divine revelations or accidental ink spills on imperial decrees. He clears his throat and reads from a golden-edged scroll. By the decree of His Majesty, His Holiness, and His Office of Agricultural Taxation, a new schedule shall be tested within these walls. You straighten up, commencing henceforth morning work, midday repose, and an afternoon segment henceforth known as the contemplative interval. There's a beat of silence. Then someone whispers, "What does that mean?" Methodios squints. "It means we're taking more structured breaks." A murmur ripples through the office like a gossip tsunami. Structured breaks, formalized loafing. Theophanes grins. "See? Told you idleness would become sacred." And so it begins. At precisely the 6th hour, a bell rings, not for a meeting, not for prayer, but for intentional nothingness, the contemplative interval. No one is quite sure what to do with it. The first day, some sit in silence, others stare at their sandals. One clerk tries to chant but forgets the words halfway through and ends up humming, something suspiciously like a lullaby. You find yourself slipping into the same alcove as before. The coffee crew is there. They nod at you, welcome back. Today's blend smells darker, roastier. You sip it. It punches the back of your throat like a slightly aggressive raisin. But your eyelids snap upward. You feel vertical. Ethiopian, one of them whispers. Comes through trade caravans. Priests drink it. Helps them stay awake for vigils. You nod slowly as if in a secret club, because in a way you are. This strange new beverage isn't officially recognized. It's not outlawed, but it's not endorsed either. It exists in a quiet gray area, just like the breaks themselves once did. And here's the thing that sticks with you. They call it buna. It has no ritual, no silver tray, no incense. Just heat, bitterness, and the creeping sense that time's about to move faster. You take another sip. Back in the main chamber, things do seem different. Clerks are more alert. Conversations start to pick up speed. Theophanes accidentally completes 3 pages of documentation in half an hour and is immediately accused of sorcery. Someone sketches a diagram comparing nap quality with number of breaks. Another proposes that every 3rd Thursday include an extended contemplative interval just to calibrate spiritual productivity. And in the middle of it all, Methodios begins drafting a document titled, "On the Philosophical Necessity of Pausing." You nearly laugh aloud. The coffee isn't just seeping into your blood, it's seeping into the culture. What began as unstructured slowness, meandering routines held together with ink and habit, is starting to take shape. Breaks have rules now. There are zones, even time limits. Someone suggests a queuing system, and you watch a scribe invent the first sign-up sheet with quill and goat parchment. Naturally, there's debate. Should the contemplative interval include snacks? Can one contemplate while reclining? What? If contemplation leads to sleep, is that failure or success? Theophanes weighs in with a declaration so profound it almost stops the room. Perhaps contemplation is simply the polite disguise of exhaustion. Everyone nods, slowly, as if struck by a shared truth. By now, the ambient snoring from Section D has become part of the office's soundscape. The scent of ink mingles with something sharper, roasted, slightly nutty. The little cups of buna are multiplying. One younger scribe even pens a tiny poem in the margin of a revenue log. Bitter sip, steady hand, empire leans on tired men. You smile, you don't know it yet. But this contemplative interval, the first of its kind, is going to survive. Centuries. It'll change names, travel continents, sprout in cafes, cubicles, and co-working spaces. But its heart will remain the same. A sanctioned moment to pause, to exhale, to sip. And here, beneath the solemn mosaics of Byzantium, you've witnessed its birth. The next day, the office feels different. It's hard to describe at first. The air isn't cooler. The workload hasn't lessened. The scribes still mutter about quills fraying and seals cracking. But something in the rhythm has shifted, like someone replaced the ancient gears of the bureaucracy with slightly smoother ones. You can't help but wonder if it's the structured break, the bean water, or just the placebo effect of labeling, your rest. Either way, it's working. Theophanes shows up with a new robe, crimson with tiny stitched birds along the hem, and announces he's decided to lean into the luxury of deliberate leisure. He then immediately sits down and begins copying property tax petitions with the speed of a startled librarian. You're back in the Magnora again, parchment in hand, surrounded by the steady scratching of styluses and murmured incantations of administrative protocol. A meeting is underway. This one's about territorial jurisdiction over a river delta that literally shifts shape every time it floods. They've been debating it for 3 weeks. No closer to resolution. The highlight of the debate is when one official draws the delta's shape in the air using his finger and insists it resembles a sleeping elephant, therefore clearly belonging to the temple of St. Irenaeus. You write this down because, well, why not? But here's where things get interesting. Right in the middle of the discussion, before the elephant can be challenged, someone stands up and announces, "I propose we pause." We've reached peak ambiguity, that phrase. Peak ambiguity. It's becoming code, a polite, bureaucratic way to say, none of us know what's happening and everyone's thinking about cheese. You glance around, no protest. They break. This time. It's not just a casual exit. There's a process. A clerk unrolls a small chart titled Sanctioned Reflection Slots. People glance at it, find their initials, and head off in pre-approved pairs to designated corners. You follow Theophanes. To a narrow veranda shaded by grapevines, he offers you a cup, again that strange, bitter infusion. Stronger today. I've been blending beans, he says with pride, like a medieval barista. The cup smells dark, earthy, almost spicy. You sip, and suddenly the entire empire seems marginally more manageable. He looks at you sideways. You know, the more we structure these breaks, the more it feels like we're not breaking at all. You blink, mid-sip, he continues. It's becoming part of the job, which means eventually someone will measure it, assign quotas, maybe even audit our contemplations. You laugh, but inside, yeah, you believe it. Because that's what empires do. They formalize the informal. They take what people do naturally, rest, pause, think, and assign a rubric. What started as quiet rebellion now has a protocol, and yet, you're not even mad. Because it works. You return to the meeting. The elephant river is forgotten. Someone's brought figs. The discussion shifts to how long a break is too long. One bold junior clerk proposes the creation of a Bureau of Pause Oversight. Everyone laughs. Then someone else adds, well, if we don't create it, the Persians might. A silence falls. You all know what that means. If another empire formalizes the coffee break before you do, it becomes their invention, their cultural export, their glory. It's absurd, but no one says it isn't true. So Methodios, the ever-watchful senior scribe, declares that all departments are to begin documenting their contemplative intervals, break logs, sip records, reflections on reflection. You swear you see Theophanes smirk. Later in the scriptorium, a group of scribes gather to sketch out possible emblems for this Bureau of Pause. One suggests a reclining lion, another offers a scroll curling into a pillow, a third proposes a steaming cup with wings. No one knows what coffee is called yet, but everyone agrees. It's important. And so, beneath the glow of oil lamps, you draft your first official contemplation report. You list: duration, 18 minutes, beverage, roasted bean infusion, unregulated. Thought subject, why taxes exist. Outcome, Mild clarity, general calm, side effects, desire for additional figs, you seal it, stamp it, submit it. And just like that, something once too mundane to name has become part of the imperial record. You don't know it yet, but one day some scholar will find this dusty scroll and smile. They'll trace back the genealogy of the modern office break, not to Silicon Valley or Victorian tea culture, but to this moment. This scroll, this you, sitting with slightly overstimulated hands, trying not to spill hot bean juice on your tunic. The empire rolls on. Today, the office is buzzing, not with productivity. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. No, it's the quiet sort of buzz, the kind that comes when something unspoken becomes known. Like when everyone in a classroom realizes the substitute teacher doesn't really care, and a collective decision is made to coast with honor. Only now, the coasting has structure. A new board has been installed in the East Hall, the interval ledger. It's beautifully carved from olive wood, with slits for parchment slips, and a central dial that someone's calling the break wheel. Break requests are now formalized. Each department receives 3 tokens a day. Use them wisely or suffer. The wrath of continuous productivity, which is still a myth, even here. You watch as Theophanes walks up, drops in a token with the flair of a man throwing a coin into a wishing well, and strolls off toward the courtyard humming what sounds suspiciously like a tavern tune. You follow. You're not missing this. He leads you to a newer, more popular alcove, one now referred to as the sip space. A humble bench under an awning, surrounded by potted herbs and incense smoke. There's a scribe already there, gently heating a small clay pot over charcoal. You sit. A cup is placed in your hand. It's thicker today, stronger, a whisper of cardamom. It's catching on, Theophanes says softly. Even Methodios had a cup this morning, pretended he hated it, then asked for the recipe. You sip. The world sharpens. Not in a frightening way, just enough to make the slow bureaucracy shimmer with faint outlines of purpose. There's talk now, serious talk, of allocating resources for more beans, of negotiating with merchants from the Red Sea, of trading fine parchment or glassware for these bitter brown seeds, and even more radical, there's a petition circulating for a dedicated sipping chamber, not a lounge, not a kitchen, a sanctified space where no writing occurs, no judgments are made, and no one asks you what page you're on. You lean your head back against the stone wall. The scent of mint from a nearby pot drifts up into your thoughts. You feel a kind of peace, not the silence of prayer, but the stillness of intention. This isn't laziness, it's recalibration. Later that afternoon, you return to the scroll room. A courier bursts in. The empire has a new edict. All bureaucrats must rest at least twice during the day. You look up from your work. Yes, you read that right. They made napping mandatory. The edict is written in ornate, reverent language. Let not the stewards of the realm fall to disorder through unmeasured strain. For the mind, like parchment, wears thin without pause. It's the most beautiful justification for burnout you've ever heard. And it changes everything. The nap becomes regulated. Cushions are distributed. Aromatics are burned. Someone starts composing soothing chants for midday restoration. A scribe invents a way to fold your robe into a pillow without creasing the insignia. You find yourself slipping into dreams not of fields or battles, but of quiet stone rooms filled with warm drinks and slow conversations. And through it all, the coffee spreads. There are now 4 official brewers, each with their own style. One uses cinnamon, another roasts the beans over figwood for a smoky edge. There are whispers of someone experimenting with chilled infusion, but that's still considered witchcraft. Everywhere you look, someone's sipping and smiling and slowly revolutionizing the nature of office life. Even Methodios has updated the work schedule. It now reads, Dawn watch, scribing and sorting. First pause, stretching and silence. Midday review, contemplative interval, mandatory. Afternoon entries, end-of-day reflections. Optional, strongly encouraged. You smile. Because somehow, without meaning to, you've lived through a complete shift in working philosophy. The Byzantine office hasn't become faster, just kinder. You still copy decrees, still dip your stylus, still argue about ink quotas and title disputes. But now there's a softness between the lines, a knowledge that even in a system this ancient, there's room for breath, and in every corner of the palace, there's the scent of something dark, warm, and just a little bit rebellious. You sip again. The empire is still here, and thanks to a few tired scribes, a lemon, and a strange little bean, it's working just a bit better. By now, you don't just look forward to the breaks, you depend on them. They've evolved from quiet moments of rebellion to full-blown institutional events. There's even an unofficial hierarchy forming, not of seniority, but of brew quality. You've heard whispers of a man in the Northern Archive who roasts his beans with sandalwood. Another clerk supposedly uses rose water. There are rumors of someone experimenting with foam, though no one's sure if it's culinary genius or a cleaning accident gone romantic. Theophanes, naturally, is leaning into this shift with glee. He's brought a new clay cup, carved with the inscription, "Let all things pause." He claims it improves the taste. You're not convinced, but it's hard to argue with someone sipping so smugly. Today's main task is a tangle of trade permits. Who can sell what, where, and to whom? You're assigned a scroll so long it takes 2 assistants just to unroll it. As you begin copying it, a question is whispered across the room. What if we made breaks rotational? Theophanes perks up. Explain. A junior scribe, barely, into his 2nd year, steps forward. We schedule staggered intervals. That way at least half the office is always rested. The other half covers. There's a pause, then nods. Slow ones. Respectful ones. Because this, dear listener, is how bureaucratic genius emerges, not in bursts of fire or trumpets, but through whispers between scribes with sore wrists and jittery fingers. The system shifts again. The rolling pause protocol is born. Within days, the board is restructured. A second break dial is installed. One for morning, one for afternoon. There's even a painted chart of preferred beverage styles by department. The Naval Office favors the dark roast. Treasury prefers cinnamon. The Sanitation Records team still drinks wine. Old habits die hard. Soon there's competition. Someone leaves a handwritten note under the brake wheel. Strongest brew in Hall C, come if you dare. You go. It's served from a dented copper pot, thick as syrup, bold as a sermon. It doesn't wake you up. It shoves you out of your body and leaves you hovering over your own productivity. Too strong, you whisper. Perfect, says the brewer, with wild eyes and no eyebrows. And then, in one of those only in a Byzantine bureaucracy moments, a committee forms. The Committee for Beverage Oversight and Refreshment Harmony, COBOR. They pronounce it COBOR. You hate it immediately, but they've already started drafting beverage descriptions in triplicate, so resistance is futile. Theophanes is elected chair. Of course he is. Their goal? Standardize the sipping experience. You attend the first official, COBOR meeting. There are scrolls, charts, even tasting spoons. One clerk suggests bean taxation tiers based on roast strength. Another proposes aroma-based seating arrangements. Methodios storms in mid-meeting. What are we doing? He growls. There's a silence. Then Theophanes stands. We're honoring pause. And shockingly, Methodios says nothing. He just exhales, mutters something about restful governance, and walks out slower than he came in. No one claps. That would be uncouth. But everyone sips, and the moment becomes legend. In the weeks that follow, the office shifts again. There's more collaboration, more rhythm. Some clerks even hum while working. Not hymns either. Tunes. Break culture seeps into everything. Meeting agendas include pre-brew and post-sip reflections. Ink spills are forgiven if the cause is temporary. Drowsiness. One clerk, famous for his insomnia, designs a brewing contraption powered by candle heat and mild resentment. He calls it the wakeful vial. No one knows how it works. Everyone wants one. And somewhere, quietly, in a chamber lined with faded maps and cracked tiles, an anonymous scribe pens the first official record. The interval is no longer merely absence. It is now presence, of thought, of rest, of bitter joy in ceramic form. You read it twice, maybe 3 times. You don't know who wrote it, but it's true. The breaks, once whispered, then scheduled, now sacred, have become something bigger than the sum of their naps. They've become identity. And whether anyone outside the empire will ever understand it, you don't really care. Because here, in the endless corridors of parchment and pebble glass, you sip and you breathe and you carry on one pause at a time. Today begins with a spilled ink pot and a philosophical debate about whether naps are more spiritually restorative in the east-facing chambers or the ones with cooler floor tiles. In other words, just another Byzantine morning. You arrive a little later than usual. The scriptorium is alive with sound, not just the familiar scratching of quills, but the clink of cups, the flutter of discussion, the occasional ahem of Methodios attempting and failing to impose silence. The bulletin board now features something new, a rotating brew of the day. You approach. It reads, "Today's recommended sip, cedar roast with hint of date and very mild existential dread." Compliments of brewer Zacharias, Hall G. You head there immediately. Theophanes meets you halfway, already holding a cup. "It's contemplative," he says, in a way that makes you question whether you've done anything meaningful this morning. You sip. It's smoky, slightly sweet. Somehow humbling. You return to your bench in Magnora, where the task of the day is rewriting tax codes to better reflect local goat ownership customs. You manage 2 lines before drifting off, not from fatigue, but because the room now encourages it. There's a sign near the door. All thoughts must be paused before properly resumed. Someone's embroidered it on a curtain. There are rumors of new rules being drafted, ones that'll formalize everything that's already become common practice. Sip permissions, nap durations, acceptable break room chants. Yes, chants, yesterday. You walked past Hall C and heard someone softly intoning, "Beans be ground, may rest be sound." You pretend you didn't hear it, but it haunts you. Still, beneath the warm madness, something's shifted. Even Methodios, stoic, wrinkled, eternally disappointed, now takes his intervals with an almost religious punctuality. You spot him now, seated alone under the fig tree in the courtyard, his cup steaming, his eyes closed. Is that a smile? You return to your work, and then it happens. A courier rushes in with a scroll sealed in crimson wax. He reads aloud. By order of the Inner Council of Temporal Affairs and Scribal Welfare, it is hereby decreed that all government offices shall adopt the practice of interval alignment, ensuring consistency of breaks across all administrative regions. The room is still. Then someone whispers, "We've been unified." Theophanes drops his cup, not from clumsiness, from awe. This is it, the ultimate recognition. What started as scattered, semi-illicit moments of leisure has now been codified, not just within your hall, not just within the capital, but empire-wide. The contemplative interval is law. You feel the weight of it settle around you like a warm cloak. And that's not all. There's a new scroll posted near the bean inventory. Chart. Proposal. Monthly inter-office brew exchanges. Each province will begin shipping samples of their local brew variants. Taste tests, documentation, rankings. You'll trade dark Milesian roast for light coastal infusions. You'll argue about flavor notes like philosophers once argued about the nature of Christ, and no one will stop you because it's policy now. You walk to the breakboard, slide in your token, and take a moment, just a quiet, private moment, to marvel at what this place has become. What once was a palace of scrolls and complaints, of aching wrists and droning decrees, is now a kind of sanctuary, a slow world in fast disguise. Yes, there are still taxes. Yes, the scroll work remains endless. Yes, someone in Treasury insists on referring to all beverages as hot tonics, which makes everyone uncomfortable, but you're no longer merely surviving the Byzantine bureaucracy, you're thriving in it, because now it breathes. You step into the sip space, the air is warm. A faint wisp of cinnamon hangs in the breeze. There's quiet conversation, gentle laughter. Someone is sketching a squirrel sipping from a tiny cup. You close your eyes and exhale through your nose. This is governance. This is community. This is coffee. You no longer think of your day in terms of scrolls completed or petitions reviewed. You think in cups. One before first light, just a splash to ease into awareness. One mid-morning, sipped slowly while reviewing property disputes in Cappadocia. Third, of course, during the contemplative interval, ideally paired with fig slices or a small cube of goat's cheese, and by now it's hard to imagine how anyone ever worked without this rhythm. Theophanes agrees. He started writing a treatise titled The Measured Pause on the Sacred Geometry of Rest. The introduction is already 78 pages long and features a diagram labeled Ideal Brew Sip Recline Arc. He presents it like scripture. No one dares argue. Today, something extraordinary happens. A visitor arrives from Antioch, a scribe named Philoxenos, representing a remote coastal office. His robes are dusty, his eyes tired. But he carries a pouch. A bulging aromatic pouch. Beans. Dark, dry, and kissed by salt air. You all gather for the brewing. He prepares it like a priest performing sacred rites. Careful measuring, slow grinding, gentle heat over a carved brazier. The scent that rises is earthy, nutty, almost chocolatey. You sip. A moment of silence. Then Methodios coughs and whispers, "I see colors." Philoxenos bows modestly. "We call it Tethys blend, good for late afternoons, and for meetings with difficult nobles." You laugh. Everyone does. The office feels like a living thing now, stretching, adapting, caffeinating. Even the Treasury Department has conceded. They've formally requested permission to receive monthly shipments of beans, citing clerical clarity and improved legibility. Clarity and legibility. From the bean, Theophanes is ecstatic. He immediately proposes a festival, the first day of pause, a celebratory half-day of reflection, sipping, and public poetry readings. Some roll their eyes, others are already composing verses. The idea catches. Murals begin to appear in the colonnades, soft-toned frescoes of scribes reclining with steaming cups, of gardens lined with amphorae, of mythical beasts asleep beside scrolls. One particularly ambitious mural depicts the god Hermes offering coffee beans to a weary clerk. You pass it every morning now. There's also a new fashion trend, sip sashes, small embroidered bands worn across the shoulder, denoting your preferred roast. Light, medium, dark, surprise me. It starts as a joke. It spreads like wildfire. Even the guards at the palace gate start wearing them. That's the thing with culture. Once it takes root, it grows like ivy. Slow at first, then suddenly unstoppable. You find yourself in a meeting about naval budgets, and halfway through someone pauses mid-sentence, raises their hand, and simply says, "Interval?" Everyone nods. No vote needed. You break. Outside, under the vine-covered pergola, someone's reading a letter aloud. It's from a monastery on Mount Athos. The monks have begun roasting beans to support long hours of illuminated manuscript transcription. Another letter, this time from a merchant ship docked in Alexandria. The scribes here have heard of your brew and seek to trade papyrus for seeds. One asked if it could be made into a cold drink. We told him he was insane. He said he'd try. Anyway, you grin. Innovation is spreading. Across the empire, across social lines, across taste buds. And all of it, every drop, started right here in this sleepy little corridor of Byzantium. You close your eyes, not to nap, to savor, to mark the moment, to recognize that you are no longer merely part of a government office. You're part of a movement, a cultural shift, a subtle revolution, brewed slowly, served warm. And somehow, without protest or fanfare, the Byzantines, the empire of endless red tape and sacred paperwork, have become pioneers, not of conquest, not of faith, but of something quieter, more lasting, a pause, a breath, a break, and a brew. The mornings now arrive with ceremony. You wake, not to the crow of roosters or the clang of church bells, but to the whisper of boiling water, to the low musical clink of ceramic against ceramic. Somewhere in the halls of the great office, someone is already grinding beans with the dedication of a monk copying Holy Scripture. The contemplative interval has a new sibling, the early stir. It's not officially sanctioned yet, but its influence is unmistakable. Clerks arrive earlier just to sit in silence, sip their first cup, and mentally prepare for the bureaucratic ballet ahead. It's meditation, but with a warm beverage. Even Methodios has joined, though he insists on calling it prescribal orientation. Today, your first assignment is a marvel of administrative absurdity. Review a revised scroll containing corrections to a scroll correcting a previous decree about regional grain measurement units. In simpler terms, paperwork about paperwork, wrapped in bureaucracy and lightly seasoned with wheat, but somehow it doesn't faze you. You have your cup, and your cup has you. There's something comforting about this new ritual. You begin to understand what no official policy ever really captured, that people don't just work for duty, they work for rhythm, for the patterns that make days flow, and tasks meaningful. Theophanes enters looking smug. "I've been promoted," he says. You raise an eyebrow. "To what?" He grins. "Director of intervals." You stare. That's not a real title. He produces a scroll. It has a seal. It's real. The position was created overnight after someone in the Eastern Hall forgot to coordinate SIP schedules and two departments accidentally met in the same break room, causing mild philosophical disagreements and one spilled fig tart. His duties? Oversee timing of pauses, ensure fair bean distribution, mediate disputes regarding mug ownership, approve experimental brews. With tasting, he has a chair now. With armrests, you don't even feel envy, only admiration, because you realize breaks have become the backbone of this institution. And as ridiculous as it sounds, they've made the work better, more fluid, less combative, more human. Later, during your contemplative interval, you find yourself sitting across from Philoxenos of Antioch again. He's brought something new, a lightly roasted blend with a touch of sea salt and citrus peel. You sip. It tastes like focus, like a breeze cutting through morning fog. He tells you about a rumor spreading from the coast, something called a coffee house, a space dedicated entirely to the sip. Not a chamber in a larger building. A building just for the beverage. No scrolls, no taxes, just drink, talk, pause. You stare at him. Madness, you say. He shrugs. Or the next great innovation. And suddenly, you feel a flicker of something, ancient and electric, the seed of an idea. Not just a pause in bureaucracy, but a space beyond it, where thought and rest and conversation can bloom like steam from a fresh cup. You return to your desk, you dip your quill, and before you write another line of grain law, you scribble in the margin, a chamber of cups. No forms, no stamps, only presence. It's not policy, not yet. But in Byzantium, that's how it always begins. With a note in the margin, with a whispered phrase, with a cup. The phrase spreads, a chamber of cups. At first, it's just a clever turn of phrase, scribbled in margins, whispered during transitions between debates about imperial road repairs and tax exemptions for lemon groves. But soon it takes on a life of its own. Someone carves it into the wood beam above the main entry to the sip space. Someone else illuminates it in gold leaf along the border of an otherwise dry scroll about trade routes near Bithynia. By the end of the week, a group of junior clerks is caught painting a mural of a massive domed hall filled with oversized cups and floating scrolls, somehow serene yet bubbling with life. Theophanes walks past and mutters, "I'd live there." And everyone nods, because it's not just a dream anymore, it's becoming a plan. Methodios calls a meeting. It's supposed to be about parchment imports, but by the third sentence, he sighs and says, "Let's talk about the cup thing." You all blink, then lean in. He unrolls a scroll. It's a rough draft, nothing official, but in the middle is a sketched layout of a circular building with long wooden benches, shaded alcoves, and a central brewing station. There are no desks, no storage for scrolls, just space and cups. "I'm not saying we abandon structure," he clarifies. "I'm saying perhaps the structure includes sanctuary." It's the most poetic thing he's ever said. The discussion that follows is lively. No one argues, but there are passionate additions. A quiet corner for naps, a shelf for sharing, favorite quotes or chants, a rotating menu of brews, no repeats within the same moon cycle, optional poetry readings on lunar eves, Byzantine bureaucracy, ladies and gentlemen, capable of choking an empire in red tape or designing the world's first artisan coffeehouse, sometimes both. A week later, the emperor's cousin visits. He tours the records office, samples a cup, whispers, "What is this potion?" Theophanes beams. "Productivity in liquid form." The cousin nods gravely, then adds, "We should have one of these in every provincial court." Just like that, it's real. A royal decree follows. Henceforth, let there be houses of pause, dedicated to the brewing, sharing, and reflective sipping of the sacred seed drink for the well-being of mind and harmony of governance. You hear the news while standing in the supply closet trying to determine whether ink rationing applies to decorative calligraphy. You sprint to the main hall where people are hugging, in a room full of parchment. The sip space is transformed overnight. Curtains are hung, cushions appear. The murky old pot is replaced by a gleaming bronze kettle with an inscription, "For the slow sip and the quick wit." And now, people begin choosing their break times with intention, not to escape work, but to connect, to share stories, reflections, dreams, and, of course, blends. One scribe even writes a play. The Pause of Thebes. It's terrible, but it's performed anyway during an extended evening interval while someone serves honey-sweetened espresso over ice. Yes, ice stolen from the fish merchant's cellar. And what about you? You're still doing your job. You still record tax figures and land deeds and strange disputes over melon rights. But you've started something else, too. Each afternoon, you take your break at the same hour, on the same bench, under the same fig tree, and slowly others gather. It becomes known, unofficially, as the original circle, the place where it all began, where one tired clerk sipped something strange, paused, and breathed. And as the empire spins slowly on its axis of rituals and robes and remarkably complex administrative systems, you sit back, close your eyes, and whisper softly into the breeze. It started with a break. You are no longer just a clerk. You are a curator of calm, a cartographer of the contemplative, a quiet champion of what some are now calling, only half ironically, the pause movement. Not that you sought this role. You were simply tired and thirsty. And one particularly bureaucratically overburdened morning, you chose to sip something bitter instead of collapsing face first onto a papyrus invoice. But now, everywhere you go, people nod at you like a philosopher. They offer you their blends to taste. They quote things you scribbled months ago in the margins of dull tax documents. Even Methodios addresses you with a certain reverence. Not warmth, exactly. This is still Byzantium, but something closer to wariness. As if you might gently recommend he slow down, and he might listen. Today, you've been summoned to assist in the planning of the first official House of Pause, to be built just outside the eastern wing of the palace. It's not a joke. There are architects, stone masons, a mosaic artist named Dionysia, who insists that the entry floor include a spiral design to symbolize the return to self through steam. You nod because that sounds meaningful, and also because she's carrying several chisels. Your assigned task: write the welcome inscription. You draft a few lines. Here begins the interval. Leave worry at the threshold. Enter not for work, but for wonder. Theophanes adds a fourth. Second sips are encouraged. You all agree it's perfect. The foundation is laid. Within days, carts arrive with marble blocks, cedar beams, bronze kettles, and, mysteriously, 3 goats. You don't ask. Meanwhile, back in the Magnora, the rhythm continues. Scrolls, scribbles, sighs. But even the work feels lighter, a bit more breathable. Like the empire has collectively loosened its toga. There's a new saying making the EO rounds. All great decisions begin with a pause. Someone claims the emperor said it. Someone else says it was a brewer in Hall J. Doesn't matter. It's now engraved on a brass plaque hanging above the original breakboard. You overhear 2 junior scribes discussing interval theory as if it were theology. One proposes that breaks should align with the sun's angle. The other insists it's the moon's influence that truly deepens reflection. A third just says, more beans. That third scribe, promoted within the month. Even the language is changing. Where once clerks asked, when is your next free moment? Now they say, when is your next cup? The sip has become the schedule, and still the bean spreads. Letters arrive from Sicily, Alexandria, even distant Trebizond. Everywhere, people are pausing, breathing, brewing. One noblewoman from Pergamon has started her own Ladies of Leisure salon, where diplomatic wives debate theology over citrus-infused espresso. It's catching faster than fire in a scroll room. Of course, not everyone approves. A small but vocal sect known as the Keepers of Uninterrupted Labor begins leaving passive-aggressive notes on the break schedule. Things like, pausing is surrender. You can't rule an empire with a teacup. Work is its own reward, if you're doing it right. They hold a meeting, only 3 attend. One leaves early to use the sip space. The movement survives. And so do you. Because now, your world has shape, a softness, a human rhythm woven into the imperial machine. You rise earlier but with less dread. You copy scrolls with care, not urgency. You greet your colleagues with warmth. You listen, really listen, during intervals, to conversations that drift like incense through stone corridors, conversations about poetry, politics, weather, dreams, all made possible by the pause. You start carrying a pouch of beans wherever you go. You've become what the young scribes call, endearingly, a keeper of the cup. You sip once, the world steadies. You sip twice, and smile, because this gentle revolution, you're living it, one warm moment at a time. It rains today in Constantinople. Not a storm, just a soft, persistent drizzle that makes the stone glisten and the mosaic tiles hum with quiet reflection. The sip space, of course, is packed. People arrive wrapped in cloaks, their cups steaming, their movements slowed even further by the weather. You step in, shaking droplets from your sleeves, and the familiar scent of cardamom and wet cedar welcomes you like a familiar tune. Theophanes waves you over to a newly added table, a proper one, carved with cup-shaped inlays and decorative handles. He's already on his second blend. Rain, he says, elevates the pause. You sit, sip, listen. Someone's reading a scroll aloud. It's not an edict or even poetry. It's a menu. The first menu, posted on the far wall, inscribed by hand, is the first official listing of brews available at the newly completed House of Pause, Eastern Ember. Bold, spicy notes of clove fig mist, light, floral served. Chilled scribes wake, extra roast, extra heat, whisper brew, mellow, laced with mint nightfall, decaf. Yes, they've invented it. No one knows how. You blink at that last one. Nightfall? Theophanes leans in. Some monks wanted to sip before evening prayer without entering a state of divine agitation. Naturally, the House of Pause is now open to the public. It stands near the Imperial Library, where scholars, clerks, and curious travelers wander in to reflect and recharge. The walls are warm-toned, the benches curved for comfort, and in the center, a domed skylight opens the room to clouds and stars. There's a hush inside, not from silence, but from shared purpose. Everyone there has chosen to pause, to sip, to be. You visit it after your midday duties. You bring a scroll, not for copying, but for doodling. You find yourself drawing symbols, not letters, not records, but quiet spirals, vines curling around, steaming cups, a scribe's hand holding not a quill but a spoon. When you look up, you realize others are sketching too. Not for work, for thought. You've built something here, not just a new ritual or a new space, a new behavior. You start noticing subtle changes across the empire. Couriers carry small flasks and stop under trees to take brief sips. Tax collectors meet in neutral zones not to argue, but to share brews and stories. Even diplomats begin offering coffee beans as gifts of goodwill, accompanied by a gentle bow and the phrase, "Shall we pause?" The culture has shifted. The Byzantine Empire, once known for labyrinthine laws and imperial rigidity, is now whispered about for something else entirely. Pace. The rhythm of work no longer defined solely by hours but by harmony, by balance, by knowing when to act and when to not. You find yourself writing a phrase in the corner of your desk. We pause not to stop, but to continue well. One evening, after an especially long session revising shipping permits for silk merchants, you wander out alone. The city glows under low clouds. Oil lamps flicker in doorways. The palace looms behind you, but ahead, the House of Pause beckons. Inside, the room is nearly empty. One brewer tends a pot. A single clerk leans against a pillar, eyes closed. You sit at your favorite table. Your cup arrives. Whisper brew. You sip. The mint hits the edges of your thoughts like a breeze, and for a long, long moment, you simply are. No ink, no debate, no scrolls, just breath, just warmth, just you. The empire has begun to hum, not with war chants or merchant cries, but with something softer, a rhythm of footsteps echoing through marble halls, the clink of ceramic on stone, the slow inhalation before a sip. You see it everywhere now, at the docks where stevedores rest their arms and share strong brews beside stacked amphorae, in the market squares, where shopkeepers take turns tending stalls so each may retreat for a moment with the cup. Even in the Senate chambers, where senators now request a reflection recess before voting on policy. And at the heart of it all, the House of Pause has become something more than a building. It's a pulse, a gathering place not just for rest, but for ideas, where poets come to read aloud under the fig tree, where artists pin up sketches inspired by steam and stillness, where the elderly come not to talk, but to listen, to watch, to nod. You are there most days, not because you must be, but because that's where the good conversations happen. Today, one of the junior scribes bursts through the courtyard gate, scroll in hand, waving like a man who's seen an angel carrying paperwork. He slams the scroll onto the central table and grins. Proposal approved. Every provincial capital to receive funding for its own House of Paws, beginning with Thessalonica. The room erupts, not in cheers, but in toasts. Quiet, raised cups, grins, clinks of ceramic. Theophanes sheds what might be a tear. Or maybe he just drank too quickly. You can barely believe it. What began as a nap behind a stack of tax scrolls, what survived as whispered rebellion over diluted wine, what blossomed as a quiet culture around a strange, bitter bean, is now policy, a network of calm spiraling outward across the empire. That afternoon, a scroll arrives bearing the emperor's own seal. It is not an edict. It is a note, handwritten to the clerks of Magnora, to you. There is wisdom in pause. May all my governors sip with grace, and may every cup steep peace where ink alone cannot. It's framed within the hour. That night you stay late, not for duty, but to help rearrange the shelves in the sip space. The newest brews have arrived. One from Antioch with a hint of molasses, one from Dalmatia with a grassy bitterness, and one simply labeled dust of the desert. Theophanes insists it's transcendent. You suspect it's just very stale. You take your time, you arrange the cups, you relight the lamps, and before heading home, you pour a final measure. Whisper. Brew, of course. You sit alone under the mosaic arch. The air is cool. Rain threatens. The empire, far from quiet, pulses gently in the background. Scribes writing, ships loading, lovers arguing politely about bean strength. But here, for now, all is still. You sip, and in that tiny interval between warmth and exhale, you understand. Something profoundly unrecorded. This empire will fade one day, as all empires do. But someone, somewhere, will still be sipping, still pausing, still remembering the strange, sweet bureaucracy that brewed serenity into its bones. And perhaps, just perhaps, they'll raise a cup and smile, because you were here. By now, the House of Paws no longer needs signs. People know where it is. They come not out of obligation or curiosity or even fatigue, but with the reverent joy one feels when returning to a place that understands them better than the rest of the world does. Even the air smells different here. A mix of roasted bean, beeswax, and memory. You step through the archway on what you know will be your final regular day in the Magnora. Not because of exile, not because of illness, but because, quite simply, you're finished. You've taught others what to do. You've copied every scroll required of you. Twice in some cases, thanks to Theophanes' accidental spill of elderberry syrup on the grain levy amendments. You've even been offered a position in the Bureau of Ceremonial Beverages. You politely declined, because you're not here for titles. You're here for the pause. You take your seat, your usual bench, slightly bowed in the center, just the way you like it. Across from you, a new scribe takes careful notes, sipping something that smells like cinnamon and almonds. She glances up and smiles nervously. You raise your cup in quiet salute. She does the same, and just like that, the rhythm continues. Theophanes joins you for one last drink. He's older now, wrinkles where flourishes used to be, but his eyes remain mischievous. They're calling you the patron of the pause now, he says with a grin. There's talk of a statue. You groan. Make sure it's seated. He laughs, then sighs. We really did it, didn't we? You look around. Every bench is filled. The kettle steams gently. The windows fog with warmth. A scribe in the corner reads aloud a passage from The Collected Thoughts of Intervals, now in its 3rd edition. Another plays a soft melody on a reed flute, improvising a tune called The Bean Waltz. No one even notices when the bell tolls for the end of shift. No one wants to leave. You close your eyes and breathe it in. The pause is no longer a moment between things. It is the thing. It's a culture, a tradition, a reminder that even amidst marble corridors and endless documentation, the soul of a people lives in how they choose to rest. And as the empire outside continues, building, taxing, arguing, expanding, you sit at peace in the stillness you helped shape. This is no longer a rebellion. It's a legacy, a quiet one, uninscribed, except in memory, felt more than told. Passed not in proclamations, but in poured cups, shared glances, and the sacred slowness of the in-between. You take one last sip. Warmth, stillness, ease. And now, dear listener, dim the lights. Let the breath soften. Let the echoes of marble and steam fade. Imagine the cup resting gently in your hands. The empire has done enough today, and so have you.